are here for the first time, welcome. Central Massachusetts Connections in Faith is a very broad network made up of lots of individuals and some faith leaders stretching from like Worcester to Framingham. And anybody who wants to be part of getting to know their neighbors and learning about each other's traditions and backgrounds, this is a space that we welcome you to. I just want to say a very brief word to kick off this evening, and then I'm going to hand over to our actual hosts, members of the Chinmaya Mission, and I'll just step up at the very end of this first hour to give you instructions for the next stage. You are at Congregation B'nai Shalom. This is a Jewish congregation, and it's been our pleasure now for several years to be the space where the Chinmaya Mission meets, primarily on Sunday afternoons for their own religious and cultural programs. It's a special treat, I think, for us as the Jewish community here in Westborough. We have been celebrating our 40th anniversary this year, and going back in time to our earliest years, we were hosted by so many other faith groups when we first arrived in town before we acquired a building of our own. So it feels especially wonderful for us to have this partnership with Chinmaya Mission and be able to pay that forward. So with that, I welcome you all this afternoon. If anybody needs restrooms, they're simply down the corridor on the left side. We have emergency exits to my left and right, as well as behind us. And I will make more announcements at the end of the hour, but we welcome you all, and I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rabbi. Perfect. Thanks a lot. Before we get started, may I call for 10 seconds of just silence for thinking about people that were impacted in New Zealand in the Muslim shootings, in Sri Lanka in the church shootings a couple of weeks ago, and in a synagogue in San Diego right here in the United States a week ago. So may I call for 10 seconds of just contemplation. Thank you. We certainly hope we don't have more of these, but unfortunately the world that we live in, we seem to hear this more and more often. Welcome to all of you here. My name is Mahesh Ganesan, and along with my co-practitioner of Hinduism here, Anita Babu, we hope to take you over the next 30 to 40 minutes on Hinduism 101. On behalf of the Chinmaya Mission Metro West, there's a number of folks that are here in the room. We thank you from the bottom of the heart for the opportunity, and we welcome you to this. Hinduism 101, 30 to 40 minutes, probably a semester's class, so we'll try to cover as much as we can. I'm sure there'll be questions, but we're hoping that we can hit up as much of the highlights as possible. So I'm a healthcare technology professional working in this area, and I've been a Hindu practitioner all my life, but I have started to gain more and more information and knowledge about Hinduism only over the last 10 years or so after I started associating myself with various organizations, one of them being the Chinmaya Mission. My co-practitioner here, Anita, will also introduce herself in a minute, but usually Hinduism conjures up a lot of different things. It conjures up images of people celebrating in a number of ways. It surely conjures up the images of multiple idols that we might be using. It conjures up all kinds of traditions as we're thinking about it. So it is our hope that we can give some of the highlights in terms of why we do what we do, and try to talk about some of the core philosophies of Hinduism today. At a high level, those are the topics we intend to cover. We'll try to get through them over the next 30, 40 minutes or so. So, to begin, I'm going to do three things. Number one, We commonly do this in the beginning of every ceremony. This is a bell that rings, that we want to ring at the beginning of any occasion or function to mark an auspicious activity. So I'll do that. I want to make sure that everything works well, not just in this event, but everything else today. The second part is Anita and myself join our hands and welcome you to this. The word that we would use is namaste. We thank you for coming. We appreciate the time that you've taken on a Saturday afternoon, and we want to welcome you there. And the third is a prayer. The English translation of this prayer is, the broad English translation is up there, but I'm going to chant that in the way we would chant it. This is a prayer that's in Sanskrit, so just give me 10 seconds. Sahana bhavatu sahanau bhunaktu sahaviryam karavavahai tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Broadly translates into what you see up on the screen here. So it's kind of hard to talk about Hinduism without linking India. And that's mostly because approximately 80% of India's population practice Hinduism in some form or the other. 80% of the country, and this is a country of 1.2 million people. Now the word Hinduism itself, though, did not just originate from that region. There's a lot of information that you see in terms of when it might have come up, but there was the ancient river of Sindhu that used to flow approximately in the region of where India is. The people living to the east of that river were broadly referred to as Sindhus, that morphed during the time of Alexander the Great and other Persians that came up, where Sindhus became Indus, I-N-D-O-S. It kind of morphed into that without the H. And over a period of time, people practicing the faith in that part of the world started to be called Hindus. So it's not that the name of the religion or the faith came up as Hinduism. It's more that the people in that part of the world practicing something in particular and living east of that particular river came to be known as Hindus. There are many spoken languages in India, but one of the languages is of particular importance for Hinduism. Unfortunately, it's not as spoken now, but the language of Sanskrit is what all of our scriptures have been written in. That's basically what we would use when we think of scriptures in Hinduism. So, India, Hinduism because of the number of practitioners, Sanskrit as a language, but that's not the only place where Hinduism is practiced. The United States, for sure. In the UK. Nepal is almost exclusively a Hindu-dominated place. There are places in Indonesia. People might think of Bali and some of those regions there. Many countries in Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka, the Caribbean region, basically where people move to all of these regions. So Hinduism is found in a lot of different places. The second aspect I'd like to mention, just with regards to India, is, and this may not be known, it's not directly connected to Hinduism, but India is also home and to the second largest population of people practicing Islam. There's only one other country in the world there's more Muslims, and that's in Indonesia. It's a lesser known fact that India has somewhere around 15 to 18% of folks that practice Islam as a religion. So just some things for you to, as you think about India and Hinduism. Let's talk about who do Hindus worship. And this is something that is probably the image that strikes up many of you, whether it's co-workers, your neighbors, people that you might see in different parts of society. One of the first things that comes up is, I see so many different idols. I see so many different forms. Who do you really worship? Hinduism is a monotheistic religion. Hinduism is in the belief of one God, but the attributes and the forms that we would use, they come in many different names. And this is something that we talk to our children, we talk to a number of folks. It's commonly thought about as a religion of multiple gods. Hinduism is a monotheistic religion, and different forms, different ways in which we worship. So why do we have all these different gods? So if you think about yourself and ourselves as just plain human beings, two things that catch our attention, right? Like it or not, most of us are going to have a ton of materialism in our lives. And the second part of it is, it's very hard for the mind to focus on something that is attribute-less and formless. One of the ways our scriptures told us we could do that is by having these different forms and attributes in order for you to focus on that higher power. We'll talk about that in a few minutes in terms of what is the higher power. But I'd like to leave the message that Hinduism is a monotheistic religion. We believe in a God, but there are many attributes and forms that we use to go and reach that higher truth. Some of the gods that you see here, some of the pictures that you see here, represent the creator. Some represent somebody that actually preserves the universe. Some represent actually destruction of evil. And you'll also see there are female versions of deities, some even animal form. This all goes back to, there's many different ways we end up worshiping that one God. These God idols, these help us focus on that higher truth, and this is a way to get to that higher truth. What is also interesting is, what you see there is those three gods that I was telling you about. The powers actually coexist and operate simultaneously. By that I mean, the creation is there in some people, there's the preservation, and in some ways you have to focus on a little bit of destruction. So all these aspects exist in different forms. They're represented through different gods, but ultimately they take us towards that supreme being. What is also important to note that just because we have a certain set of gods here, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds, there is no prescription in terms of which particular form that you worship in order to get to the higher truth. It gives you complete freedom. Hinduism as a religion gives you complete freedom to look at and focus on the form that is most appealing to you. If it is that animal form, which we commonly do when we begin different activities, so be it. If it is an attribute that you want to focus on for some specific reason, wealth creation, studies, just peace of mind, there are other attributes. So all of these things help us get there, but really it's about this notion that you're focused on all these different idols and gods, because you want to try and get to the higher truth, but you can't just think of something abstract that for most human beings. Okay? In addition to this, we also heavily believe in all of the natural elements. Many faiths do that, but for us particularly, if you think of the earth, you think of the fire god, you think of space, you think of the sky, you think of water, fire, all of these are very, very important for someone that practices Hinduism. We do this in different ways, either in the form of rituals or ceremonies, but really at the end of the day, Mother Earth is something that is extremely important for a practitioner of Hinduism faith. Okay? So I leave this slide with the message, Hinduism is a monotheistic religion, and we use all these symbols and the different gods to actually try and help us focus on the higher truth through these different forms. So where do we really pray? We've got all these different gods. Where do we pray? You could pray in temples. You could pray in your own home. Could be any combination of things. There are a couple of pictures here. Top left corner is a Hindu temple that's on Route 135, right here in Ashland. It's called Sri Lakshmi Temple. It is a huge structure. Has been here for somewhere around 25 to 30 years. Very popular temple in this region. In the Hindu festival time frame, it's a place that's buzzing with activity. Can't find parking. Get to a high school, shut it down. Right? That's basically how we end up doing it. The temple at the bottom is something that is in Andover, and this is part of the Chinmaya mission. We have a temple there depicting different forms. And the third actually is the altar in one of our practitioners' homes, right here in Westboro. It has a little altar where you take 5 seconds, 10 seconds, a little bit of time in the morning just to contemplate and think about it. Again, we are all in the journey of trying to look at these idols to help us get to the higher truth. So, how would I describe Hinduism, or how would somebody describe Hinduism? Over and above what we would think of as a religion, Hinduism is really about a way of life. To use the Sanskrit terminology for it is basically is called Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana means eternal. Dharma broadly translates into way of life. There are lots of different connotations for it. I'll get to it in a second. But essentially, Hinduism talks about as an eternal way of life. There's no particular time frame in history when we can go back and say, this is when Hinduism started. There's no specific, there's no specific time frame when it started. We are not able to say that the religion was started by any specific individual, which brings up this notion of it's actually a way of life. And that's also why somebody that might not be in any of these parts of the world, but is practicing a certain way of life, trying to get to the highest truth, is a practicing Hindu that is trying to get to, that's practicing the Sanatana Dharma. So, the message here is our scriptures, and I'll get to that in a second, our scriptures describe a web of customs and traditions and obligations and ways in which you could go about doing things. And a combination of all of those things exists in this way of life. So it's really about all of these things coming together that describe to you a certain way of living, which is called Hinduism. It is not something that we would say was started by any specific individual. It's not something that we can go back in terms of history and say, this is when we know this way of life started. So this is a concept that, this is, as a thought, is something that many of us were not necessarily aware of, but that's a message that I'd love for you to take home, which is Hinduism is a way of life. It is an eternal way of life, and it is something that was, it doesn't have a specific time frame or a date from history in terms of when it started. People could be practicing it at different times, just based on the way they live, and that they're also practicing Hindus in those cases. Okay? I just want to highlight, I know I said dharma is a word. There's no single English meaning for the word dharma, but essentially it is a synthesis of worship, conduct, morals, deeds, all related to doing good and helping us in that eternal way of life. I said there were scriptures that talk to us about a way of life. What are the scriptures that we commonly use within Hinduism, right? I'll call out a couple of them, which are very important for us. There are lots more. The principal scriptures that translates into the way of Hinduism life are the Vedas. V-E-D-A-S, Vedas. That's the section that you see at the left-hand side. They're considered essentially the source book for Hinduism, the repository of information. Again, we can't point to someone specific or some particular time in history when this was written down. It's a repository of procedural, philosophical, worship. It can be a combination of all this, but it's all noted in the Vedas. It tells you, it caters to people that are looking at things in terms of how do you go about a manual for actually doing things. It talks about people that are more focused on the spiritual side of things. It can be any of those things all coming together. The scriptures are in Sanskrit, the language that I talked about earlier. But they're so vast, encompassing everything from how you do, and what you should be contemplating on to get to the higher truth, that there's actually a synthesis or a boiled down version of it, which are called the Upanishads. The Upanishads are a secondary aspect, but they are a subset of the Vedas. Even that can be complicated for common practitioners to be able to ascertain. In order to get to the next level, a synthesis of the Upanishads is in what we call the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is a holy book that you will see a lot of Hindus looking at. It's almost a manual that describes how does one lead life. So, scriptures-wise, at the highest level, you've got Vedas, which tells you how you go about doing things, what you should be focused on, very elaborate detail. A subset of that are the Upanishads, and a subset of that is the Bhagavad Gita, which you see a lot of people using. And Chinmaya Mission as an organization, we focus heavily on the learnings and the teachings from the Bhagavad Gita to help us lead our life on a day-to-day basis. Again, to explain many of the concepts in here, what you also find in the Hindu scriptures group are what we call epics. You're all familiar with epics in different forms. Two of the most popular common epics that talk about Hinduism are Mahabharata and Ramayana. They describe certain scenarios, again, providing a manual for you to figure out how you lead life and how you respond to different situations. So, the epics are a way in which you tell the stories in a manner that is more relatable for the practitioners. Okay? At the highest level, you have the Vedas. You've got the synthesis of it, which is the second level of Upanishads. Bhagavad Gita, which is a synthesis of the Upanishads, but takes you to the next level in terms of how you go about the manuals. It's very hard to explain to children concepts from those, so what we would do, and what the scriptures have, are the Mahabharata and Ramayana, which are really epics that take learnings from all these different books and help one understand this. So that's Hinduism in scriptures. The next The next topic I want to just cover, so we talked about at a high level what is Hinduism, we talked about scriptures, we talked about where it originated. The next one I want to point out is symbolism in Hinduism. We talked briefly about it when we talked about idols, but Hinduism is full of symbols. You turn around, you're going to see it with a co-worker, a fellow practitioner, any number of books. I just want to highlight three. Spiritual symbols, ritualistic symbols, and social traditions. A spiritual symbol, which you see up there, is the sound called Om. It is believed that sound originated when this universe was created. It is a sound that we signify directly with that highest truth, related directly to that highest truth. And it is something that we use at the beginning and at the ending of practically any ceremony that we think of. It is represented that way to show different forms of ways in which you have actions. But essentially, the most powerful spiritual symbol within Hinduism is what you see up there, written in the Sanskrit language, and that's in Sanskrit. The second type of symbols are ceremonies and rituals. You can have ceremonies for practically anything in the Hinduism part. Again, the focus of those is for you to be able to think of the higher truth through the things that you are doing. You sit and do things in front of the fire. Remember I said fire is one of the natural elements that we believe in. If you think about how fire is, doesn't separate out anything that you offer to fire is consumed. We do a lot of those things basically to signify taking away our ego. So you'll see a lot of rituals done in front of the fire. The third and probably most common from a symbolism standpoint are traditions. You're going to see a number of folks, especially Indian women, have a red dot at the center of their forehead. It's a tradition that signifies there is a certain part right here in the forehead where your brain, there are certain nerves that actually get activated by applying that particular red dot, which is made out of a particular powder. Now we have lots of synthetic varieties, so it doesn't necessarily serve it. It's more of a cosmetic activity now. But that is really out there to harness the power that you have in yourself. So you see that in Indian women. You can also see it in Indian men. It's not that you need to, it's just Indian women. As you can see, I have it up. A second symbol is the symbol of ash that many of you might be very familiar with. What it's really talking about is, remember that at the end of all this, you're going back to earth in the form of ash. Constant reminder that you're going back right there. The third tradition, we talked about Namaste, or we did the Namaste at the beginning. With all my strength and with all my intellect, I am bowing before you, getting rid of my ego and bending myself in front of you to let you know and acknowledge your presence. That's really the idea behind it. You're literally doing this to convey that I am bowing before you with my full strength and with my intellect and trying to give up my ego. So you see all these different symbols that have come up over a period of time. Again, as we do this, we are trying to think about how does this help us get to the highest truth. Not everybody might be, but as you become more learned in the scriptures, as you start to think about what is that ultimate objective I'm trying to get to, these symbols and traditions help us focus. Okay? Let me do a quick time check here. So, let's talk about the next topic here. So we said Hinduism as a way of life. Where is it practiced? What types of scriptures do we use? What does symbolism reflect within Hinduism? The next place that spend a couple minutes here is priests versus gurus. Guru is a term that we're all very familiar with in the English language. It's made its way to the English language. So let me just kind of call out the two aspects here. Priests within Hinduism are people that are very learned in the scriptures. They are able to do ceremonies. They are able to do things on your behalf, whether it's in a temple or come over to your home and actually do things that will help you in the journey because they're learned. They actually take you there. Priests might provide a sermon in temples. They might come over to a home and actually do certain things. And they help you achieve your objective as a sponsor, okay, at the highest level. A guru, and this is no different than what we would know, a guru is someone that is also very learned in the scriptures, leads by example, and is able to communicate and conduct, teaches different parts of the scriptures to people. I'm going to pause here for a second. There are different levels of gurus. Anybody that is somewhat of an expert that can talk about some things can be considered a guru. You can think of a yoga guru. You think of someone in your workplace and says, this person is a guru in this. That's because he or she has a certain degree of expertise. In Hinduism, we use that, but the highest levels of gurus have different names. And acharya is the next level of a guru, and you have even higher levels, right? Somebody that is very learned, leads by example, and is able to take you along in the journey in the achievement of that highest truth. A couple pictures here. Up at the top, a priest that practices in the southern Indian tradition, a priest that practices in the northern Indian. Amongst the gurus, I'd call out, as you can see, both male and female. The leftmost is our guru, Swami Chinmayananda. Swami Chinmayananda was the guru that started the mission that we're all part of, taught the Bhagavad Gita, the holy scripture that I talked about a couple minutes ago. And he was the one that started this mission to educate our youngsters about the way of life that we call Hinduism. We are all followers, we're all Hinduism, we're all Hindu followers, but we've been learning a lot from his teachings. He has not been in this world for 26 years now. August of 1993 was when he attained Samadhi. But still his teachings have lived on for so many years and will continue to live on for many, many years. So he is for us a very, very high level guru and the reason we're all following the mission. He started this 60, 70 years ago in different forms and it's become the